Hi, I'm Brian Russell, and welcome back to class. I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of Scripture and its relationship to critical study. Some of the questions that our different textbooks raise sometimes cause persons to struggle a little bit in their faith because most of us grow up, especially if we're evangelical or come from conservative backgrounds, with a high view of Scripture, which is great, and this class is going to do nothing to dissuade you from having a high view of Scripture. However, when we talk about some of the critical approaches to the Bible, sometimes we can struggle to figure out how does my high view of Scripture gel with historical critical investigations into how the Scripture came about, whether we talk about authorship or the dates, that kind of thing. So I want to talk about an analogy that I actually got from my professor when I had this class back in, I think, 1992. I had Dr. Lawson Stone. He still teaches on the Wilmore campus, and I thought he had a really brilliant insight. And I'm not going to say that everything I said I'm getting directly from Lawson, but this was his idea. We see it a little bit in the Peter Enns book, Inspiration and Incarnation, but the idea is simply this, that when we talk about the Bible, we want to think about its two natures. Now, our Asbury Statement of Faith says Scripture is without error in all it affirms. And we've already talked about how that opens up and leaves room for the necessity of interpreting what Scripture says. But I want to talk about this way. So when we talk about Scripture, when we talk about issues, we'll talk about Scripture this way, and we talk about issues of historical background. So whether we're talking about, when we look at the Pentateuch, questions about possible sources for the Pentateuch, or we're looking for dates in which the Bible was written, and sometimes those dates are different from historical dates. So for example, when you read our introduction to the Old Testament, you'll learn that some scholars question Mosaic authorship, for example, or the date of Deuteronomy, or the genre of, say, Job, or the historical validity of Jonah. These are questions that persons raise when they study the text. Now, there's good answers to all of these kinds of questions, but what we want to recognize is this, is that the Bible, this book, didn't just drop out of the sky. In fact, it's a collection, right? So the Bible, the whole Bible, 66 books, lots of different authors written over well over 1,000-year period. And so God didn't just give us a final product through one person. God inspired multiple different authors writing at different times to record the words that we receive as revelation from God. And so part of critical scholarship, or at least one way to think about critical scholarship, is to think of it as an investigation into the human side of Scripture, how we receive the Bible through the historical processes. Who are the people? Who were the original audiences? What was going on in the wider world? We can investigate those things, and we can read the Bible as you could read any other book and investigate it in those ways. Now, here's the key thing, and this is what I learned from my first Old Testament professor, Dr. Stone. He said that what you want to think about of the Bible is think of it, the Bible, as we think about who Jesus is. When we talk about Jesus, and the creeds of the early church affirm that Jesus is who? Is he just part human and then the other part God? Well, of course not. We confess that Jesus is 100% divine and 100% human. So he has these two natures. I offer that as simply an analogy to think when we study the Bible and look at it historically, we can see the Bible as really being 100% human. And we can look at that human contribution, but that doesn't mean that it's not of divine origin. So as you study about the Bible, and again, remember, this is giving some backgrounds. Our ultimate goal is to be able to interpret Scripture powerfully so that we can speak and hear a word from God for our day. right? That's our ultimate goal in biblical interpretations is to call for a continual realignment with the good news about Jesus Christ. That's our goal. But part of figuring out what the Bible means is sometimes we can investigate the historical background. And when we do that, that doesn't necessarily take anything away from its divine nature. So as you're struggling with some of the hard questions that sometimes historical scholarship asks, don't be worried about where it goes, because we can study the historical processes without losing that divine part of Scripture. So just think about that. And remember, many scholars are only approaching the Bible from a human perspective, and their results are going to be limited to what humans can come up with. So again, this is the analogy for reading Scripture as both human, having a source in the human community, and also being inspired by God. And the good news is this: when we study carefully, when you maintain a prayer life, a devotional life, when you carefully read Scripture, that'll keep your heart on fire. And then just be open to all the insights that you can get from your studies, and be as particularly open to ones that actually help you to get a richer, deeper dive into the Bible so we can hear its good news in even more powerful ways. Again, I'm Brian Russell. I'll see you next time.